My wife laughed when someone called me sir. She said, "He's just my dad's driver." She had no idea I held the fate of her father's company in my hands. For years, I let everyone underestimate me. I smiled, nodded, stayed silent. But today at the board meeting, everything would change, and she would finally see the truth. By the time the room went silent, every single person, including my wife, would know who I really was. And no one would ever look at me the same way again. Hit subscribe if you believe life always finds a way to balance the scales. Because this story proves it. The first thing people noticed about me was how quiet I was. Not shy, just quiet. The kind of quiet that made men like my father-in-law uncomfortable, because silence doesn't ask permission, and it doesn't beg for approval. It just watches. And for years, that silence was the reason they underestimated me. Every morning at 6 sharp, I parked the black Mercedes in front of the Hale estate, stepped out, straightened my jacket, and opened the rear door. Richard Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, climbed in without ever looking me in the eye. Sometimes he nodded. Most days he didn't. To him, I wasn't family. I was staff, and my wife, Emily, stood on the marble steps more often than not, phone pressed to her ear, heels clicking with impatience. She'd give me a distracted smile, the kind you give someone you appreciate but don't really see. "Don't forget to pick Dad up at 7, she'd say, already turning away. I never forgot. I never forgot anything. Traffic into downtown Chicago was predictable if you understood patterns instead of schedules. Construction on Wacker Drive every spring. Accidents near the river when rain hit suddenly. I timed every route to the minute, not because it was my job, but because precision calmed me. Control always had. Richard spent most drives barking into his phone. Quarterly losses. Board pressure. Analysts asking questions he didn't like. When he slammed the call shut, he'd mutter to himself, assuming I wasn't listening. They don't understand how hard it is to keep something like this afloat. I did. Better than he ever knew. At red lights, he'd scroll through emails on his tablet, glasses perched low on his nose. Once, without looking up, he said, "You ever think about doing something more permanent with your life?" I kept my eyes on the road. "I have." He snorted. "Good. A man should always want more." Emily echoed that sentiment later that night over dinner. Her parents' dining room was designed to impress. Long oak table, abstract art that looked expensive because it was a chandelier that cast just enough light to feel intimate while still being cold. I sat at the far end, near the kitchen door, out of habit. Emily sat beside her mother. Richard took his place at the head. Conversation revolved around the company, as always. A new acquisition, a potential lawsuit, a junior executive who'd made a costly mistake. "I don't know why we even hired him," Richard said, slicing into his steak. "No backbone." Emily nodded. "That's what happens when people are handed opportunities they didn't earn." Her eyes flicked to me for just a second. Not intentional, reflexive. I chewed slowly, tasting nothing. Her mother asked me, "And you, dear, how was your day?" "Productive," I said. Emily smiled politely. He drove Dad to 3 meetings. Same as always. There it was. The summary of my existence. 3 meetings. Same as always. No one asked anything else. After dinner, Emily and I drove back to our condo. She kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of wine. "You know," she said, leaning against the counter, "Dad mentioned today that Hale Industries might go public again. Bigger scale this time. It's exciting." "That is exciting," I said. She studied me, eyes narrowing slightly. "You don't sound excited." "I am." She sighed. "I just wishy I don't know. Sometimes I wish you cared more." I met her gaze. "About what?" "About being more," she said, immediately regretting the words but not taking them back. "I mean, you're smart." I know you are. But you're comfortable? Comfortable. The most insulting word she could have chosen without meaning to insult me. I nodded once. I understand. She softened. I didn't mean it like that. But she had. And we both knew it. That night, after she fell asleep, I stepped onto the balcony with my phone. The city lights stretched endlessly, a grid of ambition and hunger. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered. Go ahead, Seer. The voice said, crisp and professional. The preliminary vote is split. If you don't intervene, the board may accept the outside offer. I leaned against the railing, watching traffic far below. And if they do, Hale Industries will lose operational control within 6 months. I smiled faintly. Not yet. Understood. Shall we prepare the documents? Les, I said, but not my name. Not yet. Of course, Mr. Carter. The call ended. I stayed outside a moment longer, letting the wind cool my thoughts. Somewhere below, a siren wailed. Somewhere else, a deal was being negotiated without knowing I'd already decided its outcome. The next morning, Emily was already dressed when I woke. She kissed my cheek distractedly. I have an early meeting, she said. Dade's stressed. He needs you sharp today. I always am. She hesitated. You ever think about switching careers? I looked at her. Why? I just think being a chauffeur forever isn't exactly. Enough, I offered. She pressed her lips together. I didn't say that. But again, she didn't have to. Driving Richard that day, I listened as he argued with someone from the board. His voice rose, frustration cracking through authority. They don't get it, he snapped. We don't need some anonymous investor pulling strings from the shadows. I adjusted the rearview mirror slightly. Sometimes distance brings clarity. He scoffed. You wouldn't understand. No. I understood perfectly. At the office garage, he got out without a word. Emily walked past me an hour later, heels echoing, not even noticing I was there. She was too busy rehearsing her pitch for the day, confidence wrapped tightly around her like armor. I sat in the car and checked my email. A single message waited. Board meeting confirmed. Attendance required. I locked the phone and stared straight ahead. They thought they knew who I was. A driver. A quiet man with no ambition. A husband who married up and stayed small. They didn't know about the nights I spent studying balance sheets instead of sleeping. The years I invested anonymously while Richard was still chasing headlines. They didn't know I'd bought my first shares of Hale Industries before Emily and I even met, when the company was undervalued and desperate. They didn't know I owned enough now to decide its future with a single signature. And for now, that ignorance suited me just fine. Because power, real power, doesn't announce itself. It waits. I didn't always plan to stay invisible. That part came later, shaped slowly by observation. By listening more than speaking, by understanding how people behaved when they believed no one important was watching. When Emily and I first met, I was still deciding whether anonymity would be a shield or a weapon. We met at a charity gala her father hosted downtown. I wasn't on the invitation list. I never was. I attended events like that under a different name, through a private foundation that existed only on paper and discretion. That night, I wore a simple suit, nothing tailored enough to draw attention, and stood near the back while donors mingled under crystal lights. Emily was impossible not to notice. She had that effortless confidence people mistake for warmth. She laughed easily, moved through conversations like she belonged everywhere at once. When she spoke about the foundation's mission, her eyes lit up. Not because she cared deeply, but because she loved being seen as someone who did. We were introduced by accident, bumped together near the bar. She apologized, smiling, and asked if I was enjoying the evening. It's informative, I said. She laughed. That's one way to describe free wine and expensive speeches. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. Travel. Food. Her father's work, carefully framed as admiration rather than obligation. She didn't ask what I did, and I didn't volunteer it. When she finally did, it was casual. "And you?" she asked. "What line of work are you in?" "I manage transportation logistics," I said. It wasn't a lie. Just incomplete. She nodded, already drifting mentally. Still, she gave me her number. That surprised me. Our early dates were easy. Coffee shops, late walks. She liked how calm I was. Said it balanced her. I liked how transparent she was without realizing it. Emily never pretended to be something she wasn't. She simply assumed who she was would always be enough. When she introduced me to her parents, the temperature in the room shifted immediately. Richard sized me up in seconds. My shoes, my watch, the way I spoke, he decided, just as quickly, that I wasn't a threat. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "what exactly do you do?" "I drive," I answered, meeting his gaze evenly. "Among other things." Emily laughed. "He's being modest. He works with transportation companies." Richard nodded, satisfied. That was the moment I understood something important. In that family, perception mattered more than truth. By the time we married, the expectations were unspoken but clear. Emily assumed I would support her life, her trajectory, her proximity to power. She never asked how far my ambition went, because she believed she already knew its limits. When Richard offered me the Chauffeur position, it came wrapped as generosity, a stable income, access, trust. "Family should help family," he said. Emily looked relieved. "See, this is perfect. You'll be close, and Dad knows you're reliable." I agreed without hesitation. At first, she found it charming. She joked about it with friends. "My husband drives my dad everywhere," she'd say. "At least I know he's loyal." But charm ages quickly when ambition doesn't keep pace. Months passed. Then years. Hale Industries grew unstable in ways Emily pretended not to notice. Late nights turned into anxious mornings. Dinner conversations shifted from bragging to damage control. And slowly, her patience with me thinned. It showed in small ways. The way she corrected me in front of people. The way she answered questions for me. The way she stopped inviting me to certain events altogether. One night, at a cocktail party, hosted by one of Richard's board members, I stood near the window while Emily worked the room. A group of executives laughed loudly nearby. "That's Emily Hale's husband," one of them said. "Nice guy. Shame about the career." Emily didn't defend me. She smiled politely and steered the conversation elsewhere. On the drive home, she was quiet. When we got inside, she poured herself a drink and leaned against the counter, staring into the glass. "Do you ever feel left behind?" she asked. "I'm exactly where I intend to be," I said. She shook her head. "That's what scares me." The words landed harder than she expected. She turned, as if waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. Weeks later, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. "He's wonderful," she said. "Really. Kind. Dependable. But sometimes I feel like I married potential that never showed up." I stood in the hallway, listening, invisible again. Around that same time, Hale Industries began to unravel publicly. A leaked report questioned their valuation. A class action lawsuit surfaced. Investors grew restless. Richard came home furious most nights, slamming doors, snapping at staff. "Someone's trying to undermine us," he growled one evening in the back seat. Some silent shareholder. No name, no face. I almost laughed. Board members whispered about a hostile takeover. Emily became more involved, attending meetings, offering suggestions, desperate to prove herself indispensable. "You could help too," she told me one night. "If you cared." "I do care," I said. "Then show it," she snapped. "Because right now, Everyone sees you as dead weight. Dead weight. From the woman who once said she admired my calm. The breaking point came at dinner with her parents. Richard slammed his fork down. The board is divided, he said. If this anonymous bastard doesn't show his face soon, we may lose everything. Emily turned to me, frustration spilling over. And you're just sitting there like none of this matters. I looked up slowly. It matters. Then why don't you do something? She demanded. Silence filled the room. Her mother looked uncomfortable. Richard scoffed. What's he going to do? Richard said. Drive faster. Emily flushed. She stood abruptly. I'm going to bed. Later that night, she confronted me in the bedroom. I can't keep defending you, she said. People ask what you do, and I don't know what to say anymore. Say the truth. I replied. That you drive my father around, she said bitterly. That your content being small. I met her eyes. Small isn't the same as powerless. But she laughed, but there was no humor in it. You sound ridiculous. She turned away, ending the conversation the way she always did, by deciding it wasn't worth continuing. 2 days later, Richard informed me I'd be driving him to an emergency board meeting. Big one? He said. Final vote on the offer. Will everyone be there? I asked. Everyone who matters. I nodded. That night, my phone buzzed again. Same voice. Same calm efficiency. They're desperate, he said. If you don't attend, they'll cave. I'll attend, I said. But not as the driver. There was a pause. Understood. I looked across the room at Emily, asleep, her face peaceful in ignorance. I wondered what she would see when she finally looked at me, without assumptions clouding her vision. The next morning, she barely spoke to me. As I opened the car door for Richard, she brushed past, already on her phone. Don't wait up, she said. This meeting could change everything. I watched them walk away, unaware that it already had. Because the lie Emily believed our marriage was built on wasn't my silence. It was her certainty. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and anxiety. Sunlight streamed through the floor to ceiling windows, reflecting off the sleek surfaces and the stainless steel accents in a way that made the space feel both enormous and suffocating. I stood just outside the door, wearing the dark suit that hid nothing of my posture or intent. My reflection in the glass gave away nothing, but inside, the pulse of the room was a rhythm I already knew, a cadence that had guided me for years. Inside, Emily floated among the executives, her heels clicking like a metronome for the tension in the air. Her smile was professional, but her eyes darted, scanning for control in a room where she thought she had influence. Richard was at the head of the table, the chair slightly too large for his frame today. He leaned forward on his elbows, hands clasped, face a mask of controlled irritation. I don't understand why this hasn't been resolved, he said, exhaling sharply. We've given every projection, every report. The offer is ridiculous. Someone must intervene. A junior board member spoke, voice trembling. The anonymous shareholder hasn't responded to calls or emails. If they don't act, we may have no choice but to accept the hostile bid. Emily's hand twitched slightly on the polished table. She whispered to herself, why doesn't he care? Her words meant for no one but her own nerves, yet perfectly audible to the dozen pairs of ears around her. Minutes stretched into hours. Charts were projected onto the large screen, numbers flashing, percentages of ownership, voting power, potential losses. The tension was a living thing, moving through the room like a silent storm. Every executive present seemed to shrink under the invisible weight of the unknown investor. Richard slammed a fist on the table. I want someone to call them. Find out who they are, right now. We can't wait. I watched as a young assistant hurriedly dialed a number. The phone rang, then went to voicemail. No response. Murmurs passed through the room. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. She leaned back, her chair creaking under the weight of frustration. From outside, I could hear the faint shuffle of papers, the low hum of polite panic. Everyone assumed the anonymous investor was someone distant, someone with little personal connection, someone who could be persuaded or outmaneuvered. They had no idea I was already inside that building, already familiar with every financial statement, every vulnerability, every board member's weakness. I checked my watch. Timing was everything. I had orchestrated this carefully. Every share purchased, every trust fund set up years ago, every silent investment in the background, all had led to this room, this moment, this exact second. The board thought the unknown shareholder was a phantom. I thought of it as patience perfected. One of the executives, a tall man with thinning hair, leaned toward Richard. "Sir, the terms of the outside offer could be renegotiated if we had the shareholders' input. We can't risk waiting too long, or they may pull it entirely." Richard's shoulders stiffened. "Do you understand what losing control would mean? Hale Industries could be gutted from the inside. Jobs, reputation, everything built over decades. Gone, and all because some faceless investor refused to show themselves." Emily's hands clenched briefly into fists. She glanced around, noticing the fear in everyone else's faces. I could see her calculating. She had been trying to control everything for months, believing she understood the full scope of the situation. She had no idea how wide my reach truly was. A pause hung in the air. The projection screen displayed the final vote, tally 12 for acceptance, 11 against, with the deciding vote unclaimed. One person held the key to the company's future, and no one knew who it was. The room was quiet for a moment. Every eye darted toward the door, expecting a late, arriving consultant, a lawyer, someone external to intervene. None of them suspected that the shareholder was already standing in the hall, invisible yet omnipotent. Emily whispered, almost to herself, "Where is he?" Richard's gaze swept the room. "He'll show, he has to." Minutes passed, and the tension became unbearable. Board members shifted uncomfortably, adjusting ties, tapping fingers, fidgeting with pens. The assistant called the number again. Nothing. The executive with thinning hair muttered under his breath, "This is insane. We can't wait forever." Emily's eyes met mine through the glass. There was a flash of uncertainty there, a crack in her armor. She didn't recognize me in that moment. To her, I was still the quiet Chauffeur, the man who drove her father everywhere, who never seemed to care about the corporate battles raging around him. But she sensed, though she didn't consciously register it, that the tension was about to shift. I stepped closer to the door, adjusting my cufflinks, straightening my posture, calm, composed, controlled. The storm inside was mine to command. One of the senior board members finally spoke up. "We can't delay any longer. Either the investor arrives or we proceed without them." Richard slammed the table again. Frustration etched into every line of his face. "Proceed without them. Do you understand what that would mean? Hale Industries could be finished in 6 months. Emily's voice rose slightly. "We need him. He has to show up." Her desperation was palpable. She glanced at the executives, silently pleading for someone to know what to do. No one did. I moved toward the door. The doorknob was cold beneath my fingers, the weight of the moment pressing against my chest like a physical force. I inhaled slowly, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights above, the shuffle of papers, the whispered anxieties. Timing, precision, and impact, this was what mattered. The door opened, and a slight pause swept through the room. Not because anyone recognized me. Not yet. The room expected someone in a suit, someone from outside, someone distant. They were not prepared for the reality of proximity. I walked in slowly, deliberately, every step measured. The sound of my shoes echoed faintly against the polished floor, announcing my presence without haste, without apology. Conversations halted. Pens stopped tapping. Eyes lifted toward me, uncertain. Emily's jaw dropped slightly. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her posture, trying to reconcile the man she had seen for years with the commanding presence now standing at the head of the table. Richard leaned back, confusion creasing his face. Who? I raised a hand slightly, stopping him. No introductions necessary. My voice was calm, smooth, deliberate. You already know who I am. The room froze. I walked closer to the head of the table, placing a leather briefcase down with a soft thud. The sound seemed louder than it should have been, resonating in the silence. I opened it, revealing stacks of documents, contracts, ownership papers, evidence of control that no one had suspected. Emily's hands flew to her mouth. You, she whispered, disbelief lacing every syllable. Richard's face turned pale. This can't be. I spread the papers across the table. Hale Industries is fully under my control. All shares, all voting rights, every decision, every fate, entirely mine. The room erupted into stunned murmurs. Board members whispered among themselves, trying to reconcile the numbers on the screen with the reality before them. The anonymous shareholder, the phantom they had feared, the man who could save or ruin them, was standing right in front of them. Emily's eyes searched mine, emotions colliding in rapid succession: shock, betrayal, awe, fear, anger. But you were how? You're you? Her words faltered under the weight of revelation. I ignored the questions. Let's be clear. This company will not be taken over. The outside offer is rejected. The board will continue, but under new guidance, my guidance. Richard's hands clenched into fists. You own it. I do, I said. And I've owned it for years. I've been watching, studying, ensuring stability, protecting this company without interfering publicly. Until now. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector, the shuffle of papers, the shallow breaths of shocked executives. Emily's voice, trembling, finally broke through. All this time, you let me think you were just a chauffeur. I met her gaze. All this time, you were too focused on appearances to see the truth. I never needed to tell you. I didn't need validation. I needed patience. Her hands shook as she sank into a chair. I didn't. It's not about you being wrong, I said. It's about understanding what real power looks like. It doesn't announce itself. It observes. It waits. And when the moment is right, it acts decisively. A young executive swallowed hard, finally speaking. So, all this time, the company's fate, it rested in your hands. I nodded. Yes. And now it is secure. We can move forward. Stronger than ever. The room was quiet. Emily stared at me, disbelief still etched into every line of her face. Richard's hands were trembling slightly. For years they had underestimated me. For years I had waited. Now, the consequences of their assumptions were plain to see. I looked around the table, meeting each gaze, one by one. This isn't about revenge. This is about stewardship, protection, ensuring the company thrives. Those who act with competence and integrity will continue. Those who fail will not. Whispers rose again, but the fear in their voices had shifted. It was no longer fear of an anonymous investor. It was fear of the man before them, the one they had ignored, laughed at, assumed powerless. Emily's voice, quieter now, almost defeated, said, I never imagined. I gave her a faint, almost imperceptible smile. That's the point. You thought you knew everything about the world, about me. You didn't. And now the truth is unavoidable. The boardroom had changed. The power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. I wasn't the chauffeur anymore. I was the man who held everything. Quietly, patiently, for years. And no one in that room would forget it. The room was suspended in stunned silence after my entrance. Every eye was on me, every mind scrambling to reconcile the man they had assumed was inconsequential with the reality of the owner of Hale Industries. Emily's lips pressed together as she tried to compose herself. Her father, Richard, leaned back, shock replacing his usual domineering composure. The executives whispered, murmuring behind cautious hands, as if the truth were too heavy to speak aloud. I moved deliberately to the head of the table. Each step was measured, intentional, a demonstration of control. My briefcase rested on the polished surface, the documents inside signaling authority far beyond anything they had anticipated. I opened it, letting the papers slide across the table with soft thuds that punctuated the silence. Ownership certificates, trust agreements, voting rights, every piece meticulously prepared, every signature accounted for. Emily's hands flew to her mouth, disbelief etched into every line of her face. She stammered. Her words failed to capture the gravity of the situation. She had spent months believing in a narrative where she knew my limitations, a narrative where I was the devoted chauffeur, loyal but uninspired. That narrative had been shattered. Richard's face went pale, his usual bravado replaced by a flicker of fear. "You own it?" he asked, voice trembling slightly. I nodded. "I have for years. Every decision, every stake in the company, every contingency plan. It was mine to oversee. I chose to remain in the background until the moment required my direct involvement." Whispers erupted around the table. Executives exchanged glances, their confidence crumbling. They had feared the unknown investor, imagining a faceless, distant power broker. Instead, the power they had feared was standing right before them, composed, deliberate, and unyielding. Emily's gaze pierced mine. "All this time, you let me think you were nothing." Her voice shook with a mixture of betrayal and awe. "All this time, I thought you were just the driver. Just a man I could underestimate." I met her gaze calmly. "All this time I observed, I learned, I invested, I waited. Power, real power, doesn't demand recognition. It acts decisively when the moment is right. Everything you thought you knew was filtered through perception, not reality." Richard ran a hand through his hair, disbelief giving way to panic. "Do you understand what this means? This changes everything. The board, the company, our legacy. It's all in your hands. All these years, you've been here, quietly controlling it." "Yes," I said. "I've ensured stability, protected the company, and prepared for moments like this. Your assumptions about me were convenient, but irrelevant. The company's fate has never depended on perception. It has depended on strategy, patience, and careful execution." The young executive with thinning hair cleared his throat, voice trembling. "So all the decisions we feared would ruin us, you already controlled them." I nodded. "Exactly. And now, moving forward, we will proceed with clarity and purpose. Those who act with competence will thrive. Those who fail to meet expectations will be replaced." Emily's voice, quieter now, trembled as she asked the question that had been haunting her. "And me? Where do I fit into all of this?" I paused, letting the weight of my gaze settle on her. "You underestimated me, because you wanted to see what you wished to see. That isn't a crime. It's human. But it is a choice you will have to reconcile with if you intend to remain here, personally or professionally. Your place is not guaranteed by marriage, by connection, or by appearances. It is earned." She sank into her chair, the color draining from her face. For the first time in years, Emily realized that the narrative she had believed in, the one where she understood power and influence, was incomplete. She had been viewing me through a lens of familiarity, assuming loyalty equaled insignificance, assuming presence equaled limitation. Richard's hands trembled as he leaned forward. All this, you were managing from behind the scenes. And I. He stopped, words failing. I thought I knew every threat, every opportunity. I thought I was steering this ship. And all along you? Yes, I said calmly. I've steered it, and now the course is set. No outside forces will take it from us. No miscalculations will threaten it. Control rests where it has always been, prepared, deliberate, and unseen until it mattered. The room remained tense, the executives processing the reality of the shift. They whispered among themselves, questions muted by the weight of the evidence on the table. Some were fearful, realizing their positions depended entirely on my decisions. Others were calculating, considering their loyalty, their survival, their influence in this new hierarchy. Emily's voice broke through again, softer this time. I never imagined. Her eyes were wide, searching mine. How did you? Years of observation, careful investment, patience, and discipline, I said. I made sure to understand every variable, every person, every potential outcome. I acted when timing demanded precision, and now, the moment has arrived. A ripple of tension moved through the boardroom as I began outlining the immediate actions. Departments would be reorganized, key personnel would be reassessed, and long-term strategy would shift towards sustainable growth rather than short-term appeasement. Executives listened, some nodding, others hesitant, realizing that the authority they feared had arrived not with aggression, but with calculated clarity. Emily's gaze remained fixed on me. The man she thought she knew, the quiet chauffeur, the underestimated husband, was now undeniably the center of every decision, every fate, every future in the room. She swallowed hard, her mind racing through years of assumptions, misjudgments, and unspoken suspicions. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to, I said. Actions will speak for both of us. This is not about words. It is about decisions, results, and accountability. You will understand that in time, if you choose to stay. Richard, recovering slightly from shock, leaned back. And what about the board? How do we proceed? Who remains, who is replaced? I met each executive's gaze, slowly, deliberately. Those who have demonstrated competence, integrity, and commitment will continue in their roles. Those who have faltered or acted with self-interest will be replaced immediately. This company's future is not negotiable, and its leadership must reflect that reality. The room was quiet again, each person absorbing the weight of my decisions. Emily's eyes were fixed on me, her expression shifting from disbelief to reluctant understanding. For the first time, she realized that she had been assessing power based on appearances, not substance. A junior board member finally spoke, voice cautious. And the outside offer? I shook my head, rejected. The company will not be compromised by fear or speculation. Control remains intact. We will move forward decisively, and those who resist will not remain in positions of authority. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for her glass of water, trying to steady herself. Her voice, barely audible, asked, "And me, my place, in all of this?" I fixed my gaze on her. You must decide whether you can align with reality rather than assumption. Whether you can respect competence, patience, and strategy, even when it challenges your perceptions. Your position is not a given. It is earned. The weight of my words hung in the room. Emily realized that her assumptions about me had blinded her, that her pride and desire for control had limited her understanding. She had believed she knew the scope of influence, and now she faced the truth. She had been assessing a shadow while ignoring the substance. Richard exhaled, finally regaining some composure. I underestimated you. I see that now. Yes, I said simply. Underestimation is dangerous. It leads to decisions made from ignorance rather than insight. This company will not suffer from either again. Emily looked down at her hands, processing, reconsidering, reflecting. The man she thought she had married, the quiet, reliable, unambitious Chauffeur, was not only capable, but decisive, commanding, and relentless. Every assumption she had held about him, about us, had been incomplete. I returned to the table, gathering my briefcase. Decisions have been made. The company's future is secure. Let us proceed accordingly. The executives nodded, some reluctantly, some with relief. Emily sat quietly, her mind racing, her heart conflicted between admiration, anger, and disbelief. Richard's gaze lingered on me. I never expected. You expected what was visible, I said. I am not defined by visibility. I am defined by outcomes, by strategy, by preparation, and by action. That is how this company thrives, and that is how we proceed. The room had shifted irrevocably. The hierarchy, the balance of power, the assumptions everyone had carried for years, they had all been overturned in moments, by presence, by control, by precision. Emily's eyes finally met mine, softer now, understanding tempered with astonishment. I never realized. You never needed to, I said. All that mattered was the result, and the result is clear. The boardroom remained tense, yet there was a new current running through it. Respect mingled with fear, admiration shadowed by realization. I had acted decisively. I had revealed authority in a way that could not be ignored, and the consequences would shape every decision, every relationship, every expectation from this day forward. And as Emily sat there, finally understanding the depth of my strategy, I knew that the personal reckoning she faced would be as profound as the corporate shift she had just witnessed. The game had changed. The narrative had been rewritten. And the world, for everyone in that room, would never see me the same way again. The boardroom was still reverberating with the weight of what had just happened. Even the faint hum of the air, conditioning seemed to carry the tension, as if the room itself hadn't yet recovered from the shock of revelation. Emily sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on me but her mind clearly elsewhere. Richard Hale, her father, finally leaned back in his chair, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. The executives murmured among themselves, some cautiously relieved, some still fearful, their respect mingled with anxiety. I allowed a moment of silence before speaking, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. This wasn't about humiliation or proving a point. It was about control, accountability, and clarity. The company was secure, yes, but more importantly, the dynamics had shifted in ways that demanded acknowledgement. Emily's voice, soft and almost trembling, broke the silence. So, you've had all this power all along, and you let me think I knew everything. She tried to maintain composure, but her words betrayed her confusion and disbelief. All this time, I thought I knew you. I met her gaze calmly, my voice measured. You assumed what you wanted to see. That isn't wrong. It's human. But assumptions are not reality. What matters is what is real, not what you hoped it to be. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and for the first time, I saw her not as a confident executive, in training or as my wife, but as a human being confronted by the truth she had never anticipated. I thought I understood ambition, she whispered. I thought I understood power. I never imagined you were like this. Power, I said slowly, is not about what you see. It's about foresight, strategy, and timing. It's about acting when it matters most, not constantly announcing your intentions. I acted to protect what matters, not to impress anyone, including you. She flinched slightly, as if struck by the precision of my words. Protect us, she asked, her voice quieter now, tinged with vulnerability. All this was for us. Yes, I replied, and for the company, for stability, for everything that people assume happens by luck or inheritance. Nothing here has been left to chance. Richard Hale shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. I never realized, he said, his voice rough. All these years, I thought I was guiding this company. I thought I controlled it. And yet everything was under your hands. His tone carried awe mixed with a trace of guilt. It wasn't about undermining you, I said. It was about ensuring the company survived, regardless of who believed they were steering it. My presence has always been calculated, deliberate, and now the future is secure. The boardroom remained tense, a subtle undercurrent of awe and fear threading through the executives present. I could feel their attention, each of them processing the shift in authority, the reversal of expectations. They were grappling with the realization that a man they had assumed powerless had quietly and meticulously orchestrated the very stability of their company. Emily finally spoke again, her voice barely audible. And me, after everything, after seeing this, what does this mean for me? I allowed a pause, letting the silence stretch. This was the moment of reckoning for her, the moment where assumptions would collide with reality. Your place isn't defined by perception, or by marriage, or by titles. It's defined by alignment with truth, by the ability to respect competence and strategy, and by the willingness to adapt to reality rather than cling to assumptions. Her hands trembled slightly as she absorbed my words. Her pride, her sense of certainty, her understanding of who I was. All had been appended. For the first time, she realized that her judgments, formed over years of observation and familiarity, had been incomplete. She had assumed loyalty equaled limitation, presence equaled transparency, and familiarity equaled predictability. She had been wrong. I thought I understood everything, she admitted softly. I thought I knew you. I never imagined you could. Her voice faltered, emotion overtaking her attempt at composure. I never imagined you would do all of this without telling me. Because it didn't require telling, I said calmly. The work mattered more than recognition. Results mattered more than validation. Patience mattered more than immediacy. You believed in perception, I acted in reality. Her gaze dropped to her hands. I feel small, she admitted. Her voice was quiet, almost ashamed. I feel like I've been blind to everything. That is the first step toward understanding, I said. Acknowledgement of perception versus reality is essential. You can learn from this, adapt, and respect the work and foresight required to protect what matters. Or you can continue believing in appearances, and the opportunity is lost. Emily inhaled sharply, her mind clearly racing through years of assumptions, errors, and realizations. She had prided herself on insight, on awareness, on her capacity to read people and situations. Now, confronted with the truth, she understood the fragility of assumptions and the depth of patience and strategy. Richard Hale leaned forward again, voice steadying. So, the company is secure. No outside influence, no risk of takeover. Correct, I said. All measures have been taken. The board will continue, but under guidance that ensures long-term stability. Those who demonstrate integrity and competence will retain their positions. Those who fail will not. The room was quiet, the tension lingering but evolving. Where there had been fear and uncertainty, now there was awareness and respect. Even Emily, though visibly shaken, began to grasp the depth of my planning, the precision of my patience, and the inevitability of my actions. She began, then paused. Her voice was soft, almost reflective. I have so many questions. I don't know where to start. Start with acknowledgement, I said. Understand what has happened. Accept the truth, and then decide how you wish to proceed. Decisions now carry consequences, both personal and professional. She nodded slowly, taking in a deep breath. I want to understand. I want to learn. I want to earn my place. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of determination returning. Not because I was told I could, but because I choose to. I allowed a small, almost imperceptible nod. That was all the acknowledgement I required for now. Understanding and willingness were the first steps toward reconciliation and alignment. Richard Hale's voice interrupted the moment, steadier now. And the board, are we all aligned? Yes, I said. Alignment will be confirmed over the coming days. Decisions have been made. Direction is clear. Authority is established. Actions will follow swiftly, decisively, and without compromise. Emily's lips pressed together as she absorbed the reality of my words. For the first time, she realized that her marriage, her assumptions, and her understanding of power had been shaped by appearances rather than substance. She had been assessing a shadow, while the reality had quietly orchestrated every outcome around her. The executives began to murmur again, but now their voices carried respect. They understood the magnitude of the shift, the precision of the strategy, and the inevitability of the authority that now presided over them. Some exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the man before them as someone not to be underestimated, someone whose patience and calculation had rewritten the hierarchy. Emily's gaze remained fixed on me. "Anduis," she asked softly, "where do we go from here?" I considered her question carefully. This was not just about corporate authority. It was about personal alignment, about trust, about acknowledgement of reality versus assumption. "That is for you to decide," I said. "You must reconcile your perceptions with the reality of who I am. Our partnership, personal, professional, and otherwise, depends on that acknowledgement." Her hands trembled slightly, but she nodded. I understand," she said, voice quieter now but steadier. "I want to try. I want to learn. I want to be part of this if I can meet the standards, not just because I am your wife. That is all I ask," I said. "Respect, understanding, and alignment with truth. Everything else follows from that." The room had shifted completely. What had been tension, disbelief, and fear was now tempered with understanding, acknowledgement, and cautious optimism. Emily had begun the difficult process of reconciliation with reality. The executives had witnessed a demonstration of authority, patience, and foresight that would shape their actions going forward. Richard Hale had seen the depth of control, strategy, and foresight that he had assumed only he possessed. And I had made clear, without a word of threat or arrogance, that authority is earned through observation, patience, and decisive action, not by appearances, assumptions, or entitlement. Emily's eyes met mine one last time before she rose from her chair, taking a tentative step toward understanding, toward alignment, toward a future that required humility, respect, and acknowledgement. She was beginning to see the man she had married, the man she had underestimated, in a new light, a light shaped not by appearances, but by substance, foresight, and power. The boardroom, once filled with tension, uncertainty, and fear, had shifted irreversibly. The dynamics had changed, the hierarchy rewritten, and the narrative reframed. The man they had assumed powerless had acted decisively, patiently, and with perfect timing. And as Emily took her first steps toward understanding, I knew that the most important lessons about perception, power, patience, and truth were only beginning. Because real control isn't announced. Real control is demonstrated when the moment demands it. And no one, not even those closest, would forget that truth.